It's been heaviness upon heaviness piled, and sometimes you wonder, how do you then get through it? And why we can talk about the politics of our times, and where we can talk about governance and the things that we are seeing play out. Sometimes you're not really sure how the mind operates, and the manifestation of some of those things then forms the basis for our Healthy Friday conversation today. Dr. Samuel Murage is an expert trainer and communication coach with the DTI Group, and we're talking this morning about grief, rage, and resilience, why emotional intelligence matters. Dr. Murage, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Welcome to the hot seat of the Situation Room.
Thank you very much.
Things have been hot, and we're getting into the place where we're going to start asking questions. How do we as human beings deal with these issues? Because they are, everywhere you look, there is anger. I mean, I look in the streets, there is anger. I look in Parliament, there's anger. I look in comment sections of programs. I look at social media, and everybody is carrying something that's very, very difficult. And that may then fuel the decisions that we make, how we speak to people, how we deal with other human beings. So that's what we're going to talk about today. It's heavy, but we're going to do it anyway because it's necessary to do. But before we get into it proper, let's have you interpret a proverb that Dennis is going to share from Ethiopia. And we'd like to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, Daktari is smiling, but Daktari, we are in East Africa, and we talk about Ethiopia being a country that has never been colonized. They really fought the Italians in 1896. But when you talk about their coffee, Kenyans and Ethiopians always struggle who has the best coffee, and it just doesn't end there, because when it comes to our long distance runners as well, who is the best? We're always fighting to ensure that we have more gold and perform better, especially during Olympics. Again, Ethiopians believe that the Ark of the Covenant is in their country. In the Church of Our Lady of Mary, Zion, in that country. So if you want to perhaps just have a glimpse of the Ark of the Covenant, just next door. But our proverb today: no one washes their hands with only one finger. No one washes their hands with only one finger. How would you interpret that?
Thank you. A very good one. No man can succeed alone. No man is an island. You need other people to succeed in life. And basically that is what I would mean. You can never succeed in life alone. You need other people in your life so that you can be able to succeed.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You can't do it alone.
Yeah.
It is also the spirit that built this country to what it is, the spirit of Harambee. Everyone coming together, chipping in. That's why the schools that we enjoy today is as a result of Harambee.
There you go. Very, very true.
Yeah.
I think it's apt that we have this conversation on a Healthy Friday discussion this morning, especially in the light of the things that we've seen happening in the country. And sometimes we say, those are soft issues. If you need help, you can go and find somebody on your own. And we don't need to make it a national conversation. But we do, Daktari, that the nation is suffering. And we're not just talking about that there is no money, or that there are no resources, or that there's poor governance. That we have individual units of people who are grieving, who are angry, and who are still resilient to make their point heard. And we see this and hear this by the utterances, and then furthermore by the actions that take place. There's a lot of grief because there's a lot of blood that has been shed. There's a lot of grief because there's a lot of destruction that has been meted. There's a lot of anger because I think people have not come to terms with exactly what the issue is. But I'm not the expert, you are. We want to have this conversation with you to try and understand what to do with this feeling that sometimes you can't explain, but that you want to get rid of. So the grief and the rage that is being felt by people today, how do we start to deconstruct that? How?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. As you said, is a very deep conversation. Looking at currently what is happening, I'm just going through what you've shared here, tears and losses. Of course, when we are talking about grief, rage, and resilience, this sometimes happens when real life issues touch us as individuals, either as a family, either maybe in a business, or probably out of what maybe has caused one or things either to happen, and of course touches our hearts. When I got this issue, it reminded me of the very first time I lost a very close friend. I would say she's a friend because she was my mom. At that point, I was very, very young, quite young. And at that point, maybe I could not have been able to understand what grieving means. Or of course, thereafter, losing a dad, a parent as well, not very easy. Also, at that particular time, I was a bit older, getting to understand that there are things that happens in life. Of course, when we don't see it, and we don't dig in deeper into it, we might not be able to understand what is underground. So when we're having this conversation, maybe looking at what you call the iceberg model. The iceberg model is where we are looking at things that are happening at the top, but then what are the deeper things that are happening? So we are looking at the 10%, which now we are able to see people becoming angry, but of course looking at where are these issues coming from, the 90%, because 10% is where people are able to manifest the anger, they are able to show their frustrations. They're able to go out there and probably do what they're supposed to do, because 90% we cannot be able to know what could that be, not unless we have a very deep conversation about the same.
But Daktari, if we talk about the iceberg model, even as you look at it, it is a minute iceberg that you see on the top, but underneath is such a humongous bag that is down there. But if you look at our situation, it is anger that has manifested over time, and it is one that is being brought forth by fact that promises have been made, have not been kept. And individuals, I'll speak about Kenyans, have complained, they've raised their voices, they've tried to speak, but no one really wants to listen, hear what is being said and deal with that. Instead, what you find is, I am here, I am the big man, I don't care what it is you're saying, I am here and I'll do as I wish. Just how does that settle down with a people who are angry, and rightfully so? How do you deal with that if the person who's supposed to listen is not listening? Instead, they're belittling you.
And that's the reason why we are having a conversation about the iceberg model. Why? Because we are just seeing the 10%. That's just the tip of the iceberg. And there is a lot probably that could be underlying. And when we are looking at the 10% of people going out to either to demonstrate or maybe to manifest their anger, it is as a result of just what's correctly said, probably some promises that they feel they have never been fulfilled, or maybe they are looking at the expectations we've never been cut. But of course, looking at, when you're talking about grief, it's I would say that it's very wide, because we are not just talking about people losing their loved ones. We have people who have lost businesses, and I know what it means when someone loses a business, because I've done that before. All right, where you work so hard, but then eventually, because of one or the other, you find that you've ended up losing that business. All right, so either could be like friends, but of course, at this point, I would just have that conversation about the 90%, because that is where basically the real issues are. Yeah.
So, it's what we seems that is happening at the moment is that there's a lot of underlying issues that have not come to the fore. And that for me, and where do we see that this is a manifestation? Especially if we want to liken it to what's happening in the country at the moment, where you do have peaceful protests, and there were people who are coming out to voice a certain thing, and that's coming from a place of anger. But we also see that same anger manifested when goons, paid or not, where goons come out from nowhere where people want to then mete out violence on others. Look at all the things that we saw that happened on one night. Women were raped. There was shelter that was denied to people who couldn't find a place to sleep on Wednesday night. There were properties that were destroyed. There were people who were looted. Millions of shillings lost because people took advantage of a situation that was meant to go in one direction, but it went into the other. But these things are not being perpetuated by robots. These things are not being perpetuated by people who've come from another planet. They're human beings. So what is it that is happening inside people's hearts and minds that's getting us to the point whereby it really is really ugly to look at and experience? What's happening?
Just as probably we've seen it, they've correctly said, is about feeling that, for example, there are things that have not been fulfilled, and maybe we talk about the young people like Gen Z, for example, addressing the issues that maybe are very close to their hearts, whether it's about employment, whether it's about the economic status of the country, whether it's about the businesses that needs to start, but they are unable to do that because of lack of capital. These issues, I believe that these are issues that people can actually sit and have a real conversation about that, because it's not just about living is about the purpose. Why are we here? Why do we exist? It is not just about what you do. It's about how you make other people feel. And I think it's very key to think about the legacy that you want to leave behind. So when you think about that way, and when it comes to the issues of having a conversation, is we are looking at in the next couple of years, like 10 years or 20 years, how do we want to be remembered as individuals or leaders? Business leaders, government leaders, or maybe political leaders. How do we want to really be remembered? And I believe having a conversation, because not unless there is the acknowledgement, there are the issues that need to be addressed, then there can never be the way forward. So having a conversation about what are these issues that are making, maybe people get to stand and feel that either their expectations have been curtailed or their expectations have not been met. So having that great conversation first, and that's where when you're talking about healing, it starts when people acknowledge that yes, there is a problem and there are issues that needs to be discussed. And there can never be the way forward or can never be the healing process, not unless, one, there is that acknowledgement, there are issues and there are real issues that needs to be discussed.
What do we need to acknowledge? Sorry. What do we need to acknowledge? If I hurt you, or if you hurt me, if I said something to you, or if there's a national umbrella of a certain feeling, what do I need to acknowledge? And who needs to acknowledge it? Do I need to come to you and say, yes, Doc, you actually hurt me, or this is the feeling this is what I'm feeling? Who has to acknowledge before healing happens?
I think it's two-way. I believe it's two-way. When we're looking at if there must be a way forward, there must be the first step. And as I said, it's just like the way, because the discussion is about grieving, and rage and resilience. When we are looking at that, of course, we take people through the healing process. The very first step is basically the acknowledgement. All right, and as I said, I would say it's actually it's two-sided. Like yes, there are issues, there are promises that have been made. What are some of these promises that have not been kept? Can there be a discussion about the same? All right, so that's the point that I'm talking about.
So let me paint a picture. Promises have been made, they've not been kept. I have raised concerns with regard to this is what you promised, but this is what you have delivered. I've already started the conversation with you. Instead, what I'm finding is an individual who's ready to kill, to maim, and disappear somebody. And even when we continue to now raise concerns on how you're handling the matter, still I'm being met with deaf ears. At that point, where do I go to? For that conversation to happen, the other party has to be willing to come on the table. But what if the other party says, Jipange?
Yeah.
How do you have that conversation if there is no even table to sit on or chairs have gone?
Yeah. Maybe probably there, in case there is no such, maybe the willingness for either parties to. And when I'm talking about either parties, is basically looking at what are the issues and what are the real issues that are affecting us as Kenyans at this particular time, you know. And the agreement is looking at those who have been hurt, the people that we feel that probably have been hurt, and the people that feel that, yes, you know, we feel like we are on the right track. So not unless there is that concessions about where do we move from where we are today. Because not unless there is such a conversation, these issues will always come and, you know, they always be there. But of course, having the point of having a clear conversation about what can be discussed to start the healing process, I believe that will be very, very key. Because we are not looking at, you know, in the next 1 year. As I said, when it comes to the iceberg model, we are looking at the 90% of the issues which are underlying, and you put it very correctly. What are these 90% of the issues that the Kenyans feel that these are the issues, and the real issues that when these issues can be discussed, there could be, you know, a way forward. You know, and probably when there is that acknowledgement, these are the true issues, and this is where we are getting to have the way forward can actually be very easier, or maybe how to go about it.
How do we go about it? It's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah. It's quite difficult.
Because we're dealing with ugly things here. We're dealing with very many other. Death is not something that you want to have to deal with, especially you're dealing with the death of a loved one. I mean, I imagined the young boy. He's 17 years old. I don't know him. We don't know him, but we felt something when somebody who was not involved in any of this at all then loses his life. I don't know him, but something in me, I'm angry that had to happen to him. And then I look at people who were in the city doing their business and their livelihoods. They wake up the next morning and they're at zero. I don't know them, but I'm angry, and I'm saying that why then do we need to have things like this? I don't know them. If I were to pass them in the street, I wouldn't know who they were. But I see things like that and I feel a certain kind of way, and I don't like it. And then I think about the women who've come out to, and the mothers and fathers who've come out to mourn their dead. I don't know them, but I'm angry and I don't like it.
Yeah.
And this is the feeling that people have over and over again, but it does something to you. That you wake up the next day, or you get into the next minute where you have a little bit less than you did before. And this is the person that is mushrooming with others that's making up society today. This is who we're putting out. And we think that we can remove that person from the everyday, from the politics, from the governance, from the community. We think we can remove that feeling, but doesn't it bleed into everything that we do?
Yeah, correct. And I believe one of the things that probably we could be more aware of is also being a very emotionally intelligent, individuals, and connecting the three areas that we're talking about. Emotional intelligence, I believe, is very key, because yes, we feel we are really hurt, but then what's the way forward? We've lost our loved ones. What's the way forward? And I believe what we do is really what matters a lot. You know why? Because when you're talking about emotional intelligence, is basically being able to understand our emotions, being able to read the mood, being able to regulate these emotions, and being able to manage emotions in such a way that we are not creating, we are basically responding in a more constructive way. So what I would say is that when we are talking about maybe, for example, like leadership, or we are talking about governance, the key aspect of emotional intelligence plays a very critical role, because it's about how you handle the issues that tells us whether you are an emotionally intelligent person or even not. And that's why we are talking about when things happens, getting to have an understanding about where these issues are coming from is basically being more aware, and looking at what we call the key competencies of emotional intelligence. One is about being self-aware. What are the issues? That's why the reason why we are talking about the 90%, we're talking about being self-aware. The awareness about what are the issues what are the underlying issues that need to be addressed. And of course now the self-management, whereby you are able now to manage these emotions. And that's the reason why I'm talking about could be two-way. Because yes, we are hurt, but then do we remain like that? There must be a way forward.
Okay. Feels nice. Misery loves company, isn't it? Sometimes you enjoy saying, oh, you're woe unto me, and this is a terrible situation, and we can. But then how do we move to the next place? We'll come back from this break and discuss that. We're having a conversation this morning with Dr. Samuel Murage, who is an expert trainer and communication coach. Our Healthy Friday conversation is around grief, rage, and resilience. Why emotional intelligence matters. How do you get there?
Basically, still having this conversation about, because I believe that having conversations about emotional intelligence, that's why we come in as experts in terms of equipping and empowering individuals to understand that when it comes to how you handle issues is having been able to build the capacity to do that. And the way you can be able to do it is basically getting to be more equipped in terms of how to handle issues. And as I said, being able to understand the four competencies of emotional intelligence is key for any leader, or maybe for individuals as well. For example, I just mentioned about the self-awareness is basically being able to read the mood. All right, being able to understand the challenges that the individuals are going through, or maybe the world, the Kenyans are going through. There can never be the progress, as I said, without having that conversation. All right, and that is one of the key pillars that we really look into in terms of self-awareness. And I believe it's very good to always stand and reflect even as a leader. Why are these issues coming up? And having a moment to reflect is key. As I said, it's part of being an emotionally intelligent person. Being able to understand, being able to read the mood, being able to adjust depending on what is basically happening. And the second competency is about the self-management, where you are able to regulate emotions, And as I said, when you are looking at the depth of the issues that needs to be discussed, that triggers the negative emotions, being able to manage those emotions is very, very key.
Dr. The entire conversation around emotional intelligence is deeper, and it is one of the easiest ways of finding solutions to problems that arise. And for that to happen, both aggrieved parties must be willing to set aside the difference, not forget them, but come on the table and discuss. But what happens when you deal with individuals who, first of all, don't know how to self-manage? I'll give an example. Our parents who lost their loved ones have come to grieve with the fellow mourners, fellow parents, to lay wreath. But at that point, the individuals accused of killing their children lob tear gas. At that point, self-management has flown off the window. You find the statements being made after that, that even these women who came out are being called terrorists and treasonous subjects. What happens if the other party cannot manage themselves and they still have problems and issues that have to be addressed? Where does one go to? How do we bring these two people on a table?
Yeah, I would say that could actually be a very difficult because, as I said, when it comes to having a conversation, it cannot be one way. It can always be two way, and that is where that the healing journey or having the ability to address the issues can always start. Being truest to yourself. And having that conversation is where I would say that it's where it can all start. All right, I wouldn't say this side or that side, but of course, as I said, being emotionally intelligent, individuals is where you've got to read the mood and understanding what are these issues that needs to be addressed. So it can't be two way. It can't be one way. It can always be two way.
Be two ways.
Yeah. So there must be the willingness for the aggrieved parties.
So how would you? Let me just put the country Kenya into that box. How then do we deal with the grief that the country feels, the anger that is in there, and the need for healing to happen? How would you, from an expert point, how should we approach this? How do we find healing?
Having maybe as just as you said, as an example, where you have someone who a parent who has lost a loved one, and a loved one is a result of maybe protest or what has been happening in one or the other, for example, and looking at how can that issue be addressed to the aggrieved person. Because it's how that issue is addressed that would really matter a lot. Yeah, that would really matter a lot.
So the assumption is that there's only one aggrieved side, that there's one aggrieved party. But how do you then achieve this emotional intelligence when it's very clear that there are two aggrieved sides?
There can only be a solution if there is a willingness to have a conversation. That is what I said. The acknowledgement that the issues that needs to be addressed by the two aggrieved parties, and once there is that acknowledgement, then the issues of having the way forward really becomes easier, because it's about how and how the issues can be addressed becomes a bit easier. But of course, if there are issues where is only one party that feels is aggrieved, and there is no there is no other party that is feel that is actually hurting or even hurt, that becomes a big problem. It becomes a big problem. And that's why for when it comes to leadership, I believe that the performance is based on how emotionally intelligent person is. Because it's said when it comes to performances, whether it's on leadership, whether it's on governance, it's contributed massively on how emotionally intelligent the person is.
It's interesting because I've just seen a comment because we can talk about this as individuals, whereby two individuals can have an issue, but we have to take this conversation to the national scale, whereby it is very clear that there are issues and they abound. And Marvelex says that we are in a toxic relationship where government is blaming everyone from the church to single individuals, and that there needs to be a turning point. That there is a toxic relationship at the moment where people are saying one thing, where others are aggrieved over another matter, where government may feel that this is not the direction in which we will be going, but it affects every single thing that we do. So are we saying that emotionally unintelligent individuals coming together, making up units, whether it's family, from there towards community then grows up into society then makes its way into the nation? If we don't have emotionally intelligent people, or who have not achieved emotional intelligence at some point to then be able to do a certain thing, that we then see the manifestation of that problem on the national scale likened to what we are seeing today. People are not able to talk to one another. Maybe they're able, but they're not willing to talk to one another. We are not willing to sort out issues. For God's sake, I'm not going to come to you and tell you that I was wrong, or that perhaps we should find an amicable solution to this thing. Are we fundamentally flawed? And is that what brings the problem?
I would say partly yes, and also partly in terms of how do we channel the issues that that maybe we feel that maybe there are promises, for example, that were made and then they have not been fulfilled. How do we channel that? And you just said correctly, where, for example, one party feels that they have been aggrieved, the other party feels that we are good. We are good. Having that, starting that healing process can actually be very tough. It's not as easy. Where it's one-sided. If it's two-sided, then at least that can actually be a way out.
It is difficult. I agree, but a solution has to be found at the end of the day. If you made promises you've not kept, and I've told you've not kept them, but still, even when people have died, it's your responsibility to protect them, and you have not, and I still raise it to you. You still don't care about it. And here we are talking about a toxic relationship that does exist. And you see, in toxic relationships, both parties don't want to talk to each other, but still there is need for solution for people to move forward. So in terms of which way Kenya, how do we move forward in this space that we find ourselves in? How do we heal the nation? What must both parties, both parties aggrieved. Government says wrong has been done to us. The citizenry says you have done wrong unto us. Then how do we come together? Because that's where rubber meets the road. Because everyone is a hardliner in this matter. How do we break all these barriers for us to speak?
Not unless if it's a hardline, not unless probably you soften your stand. And I just gave an example of when you're talking about grieving, of course, as I said, is huge. It's wide. All right. Having to admit there is a challenge, not unless you've got to a point whereby you admit that yes, there are issues that needs to be addressed. I don't think there could be any way forward, as far as I'm concerned. It's just like, for example, you've lost a loved one, and then you've not gotten through that process to really admit that yes, this has really happened. You'll not be able to start your healing process or even your healing journey. Yeah.
Is there hope for the country Kenya to heal?
I believe so.
What will it take?
I believe so. I believe so. As we continue to have conversations from different, stakeholders, eventually I believe that could be the way forward, because we are looking at the legacy. How do we want to be remembered? And that's the reason why we are talking about the healing process is about how do we want to be remembered in the next 10 years, 20 years, all right, in the next 30 years. For those who are very young, they are looking at in the next 20 years, in the next 30 years. How do we want to be remembered? And I believe that there could be the way forward, or maybe probably there could be there could be a lot of hope, and I believe that if the citizens and those who are in the leadership can actually come to terms that there are issues that needs to be addressed, or maybe having to acknowledge that there are issues, the underlying issues that need to be addressed, I believe that could be the starting point.
Dr. What is a delayed healing process doing to the country? What is that doing?
That's the reason why there is that manifest of anger. And you see, that can also be very destructive at the same time. And that's why when we are talking about emotional intelligence, it is having the ability to regulate the same. Because yes, you would feel we are really hurt, but then would it end up causing distractions? Or if it can actually be managed, can there be hope? Yes, there could be hope. And that's the reason why, if, for example, one has anger issues and those issues are not resolved, eventually what happens, it causes distractions at the same time.
So then is it okay for you to say, you know what, because I've heard this a couple of times over just the last few, I mean, even in the conversations and the ones that happen on the periphery, and for us then be able to put them on this platform and say, well, people say, well, let's just give peace a chance, let it be for peace. Can peace be that thing that you want to take, and so there's a mess over here, but you want to take peace kind of like a blanket and cover everything and say, okay, well, let's, for the sake of peace, let's just be quiet and let's not say anything anymore. Let's not go out into the street. Let's not protest. Let's just be quiet. Let's just do this for the sake of peace. Can you do that and cover up all the ugliness for the sake of peace? Is that healthy?
I would say that it will not be healthy. Why? Because we are not just looking at it's just like the way one would feel sick, and then you go and just buy tablets just to cool the body, without really necessarily looking at what's the root cause of the whole issues. If there could be the root causes that can actually be addressed, it becomes easier to come up with amicable solutions. Yeah, because if we just do things for the sake of doing it, for example, just as you said, we just create an environment where we are assuming that things are good, and probably they could not be good. What will happen in the next couple of years? And that's the reason why when it comes to maybe like grieving, where, giving an example, one has lost the loved one, and then they just don't want to show it. That they are not.
They're not okay.
They are not okay. People come and tell you, "Don't worry, be strong. Be strong for your kid. Be strong for your family." At the same time, back at the private room is where you go and really cry, because sometimes we cannot be able to see how you feel. But then you are the only one who knows how you actually feel it.
So there is a subject of the fact that if you look at the issues that are being raised by Kenyans, is we want justice be done. We want corruption to come to an end. We want better governance. We want better economic situations for us. We want to be able to afford living in the country. Let's say those are our 5 demands. And this is part of our conversation to you. And you don't meet that. And the part of conversations that Kenyans are saying, we don't want any other conversation. This is exactly what we want you to do. If these things are implemented and are done as Kenyans say, Kenyans would be happy. But ostensibly you find these are things that are not being done. Why do you think that could be the case? Is it that the other party is tone deaf?
Probably because the rate comes in for what you call either humiliation or maybe expectations which have been met, which have not been met, and that's why this all comes up. As I said, what you see is the 10%. The 90%, these are the underlying issues. You get the point? Yeah.
So how, and I think this is the thing, because we all seem to be in a bit of an artificial state at the moment, whereby there's walking on eggshells, there's artificial peace, there's artificial ceasefire. But those underlying issues, it's like, again, going back to the iceberg, what lies beneath is unbeknownst to many people, but it is there. You cannot deny its existence. And if you're in a pressure cooker situation, at some point, the lid is going to pop off. And we will get into situations that are much worse that we'll not then be able to handle, because all of this stems from what an individual has inside. How, and I'm still back on that, how do we make sure that this pressure cooker situation does not explode? How do you actually go to, I think about every single conflict situation in the world, and there had to have been a peace and reconciliation mechanism that was brought into place after that. It happened in Liberia, happened in Sierra Leone, it happened in South Africa, it happened in Rwanda, it happened in the former USSR countries that broke off, Serbia, Slovenia, all of those countries. It happened in Germany. There are countries where conflict are still happening today, which of course you will not have peace and reconciliation because there's still active conflict. It's an example. But the peace and reconciliation aspect, one of the things that you talk about is the acknowledgement of the underlying issues that brought about these conflicts in the first place. Is it not something that you can preempt and say, look, we need to actually look at these things, otherwise we're hurtling into a much worse situation? And that brings about the emotional intelligence that you talk about, to be so tuned that if we don't deal with this thing, we will be in a deeper problem. And that's what, for me, it looks like emotional intelligence is saying. You have to be tuned to feel it, to understand it, to know that if I go in this direction, this will happen. If I don't, this will happen. How do we use this intelligence actually to bring about situations that are then for progression and not regression?
Yeah, and you've put it very, very correctly, because what doesn't pain you or hurt you, you cannot heal from it. All right? Not unless you get to a point whereby you've got to listen to the issues that, for example, he has mentioned about maybe unemployment, or maybe you mentioned quite a number of them.
Jailing the corrupt, unemployment, justice,
justice, all that. Not unless this you get to a point whereby the leaders are willing to have that conversation, even if you are to have, the reconciliation mechanism. Will not get to a place where we have that solution, because just examples of the countries that you've mentioned is where there is a willingness. As I say, this is the very first important step on acknowledging, yes, these are the issues that need to be addressed. That comes in when you've listened and you have reflected and you've seen this is what's happening, and we need to have a conversation and get to see these are the issues that need to be addressed. I believe that if that could be the starting point, it could actually make it easier to have a healing process. There is no reconciliation without first acknowledgement of the issues that need to be addressed. Yeah, because if there is the hard line on the aggrieved parties, then it means there can never be consensus under the same thing.
What would be, sitting at the periphery, what would be your suggestion or the way forward to both aggrieved parties?
I believe that looking at the past, I believe that the church has also played a very critical role in terms of initiating reconciliation in many countries. Why? Because of probably the trust that has been put in churches. And when I'm talking about churches, I'm talking about religious organizations, and having such to start off the conversations. I believe that could be a way. And I was also looking at, in the past, what are some of the strategies that have been used to start off such conversations.
Well, I mean, I think there's a long road. I think that the acknowledgement, one of the things that you talked about perhaps is the first step that a lot of folks have to go to acknowledge that there's an issue, and then to acknowledge that, certain things need to be done, and then to be accepting of it. And then to just be able to look and say, well, how are we going to apply these things? Conversations like this start us off in that direction to say that, well, look, if something's to be done, this is where to start. Dr. Samuel Murage is an expert trainer and communication coach with the DTI Group, has been our guest this hour, starting off that conversation around, okay, what must we do to start to chip away at the ugliness that a lot of folks are feeling at the moment. Thank you for being here this morning. We really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you very much.
The hot seat continues. Good morning.
This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.